Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight's Artist Talks for the 49th Annual Juried Show. I am Emily Hankins, and I am the curator and manager of the UWM Union Art Gallery. Tonight's event will be recorded, so be sure to follow the Union Art Gallery on Facebook or Instagram for access to tonight's video. Speaking of, in the chat, I'm going to be putting in some links. So I'll send that out. So there's links to our website, the Black Lives Matter resource page, social media pages, and the link to our virtual exhibitions. So the Juried Show will be closing in the gallery tomorrow, March 18th, but you will be able to access it soon as a virtual exhibition. Keep an eye on our social media accounts for the direct link once that is up and ready to view. Some housekeeping and some events. So I just want to let you know that the next and final show of the 2022 spring semester is our annual first year experience exhibition. The first year program in art and design at UWM's Peck School of the Arts prepares students to be creative, engaged, and ready to advance in their chosen areas of study. The first year is a time of artistic and personal development during which students choose their areas of concentration and begin to see themselves becoming practitioners in their field. The Union Art Gallery's first year exhibition is an opportunity for these students to showcase the work they have created during this process. Join us in celebrating the work of these talented artists. That exhibition will be opening on Thursday, April 14th, and there will be an opening reception that day from 5 to 7 p.m. And then there will be remarks from professors at 6 p.m. And the show length will run from the 14th to April 29th. And this will also be the last show to go up in our gallery space that we have had since 1972. Due to union-wide renovations, we will be moving to a new space in the Union by spring 2023 at the latest. This also means that our fall 2022 semester calendar will feature events and pop-ups and other venues since we won't have a gallery in the interim. I encourage you to follow along with our social media accounts through summer and into the fall to find out about our creative programming. And with that, I want to, again, welcome you all here tonight to the Artist Talks event. We will be hearing from 7 artists in the show about their work, artistic practice, some behind the scenes info, inspirations, whatever they'd like to present to us today. And each artist will have around 10 minutes to talk, and they will be presenting alongside a PowerPoint. Once everyone is done, we will have some time for Q&A at the end, some unmuting microphones, general chit-chatting, and general congratulations to the artists in the show. And I will then, after that, close out the exhibition. Just remind you, send the links again if you hadn't received them. And then as we go along, as people are talking and doing their presentations, feel free to leave comments or questions or just general congratulations in the chat. And then when we open up later, we can kind of chit chat and it'll be sort of like we're in person, but we're not. So yeah, that'll be kind of the general schedule of things. And with that, I think we will start. Let's see. Okay, we can start. I believe you can just unmute yourself, Pavonis,
Yep.
And go from there. Okay, great.
Hopefully you can hear me all right.
I can hear you
Right.
just fine.
Perfect. So my name is Pavonis Giron. I'm a first year transfer student here at UWM, coming from the high desert of Southern California. Going to be discussing my abstract art as it relates to the piece that was on view in the Juried show. All right, so this is the piece that's in the show. It's entitled Great Cloud. It's a 9 by 12 inch piece that was created by painting a textured acrylic ground over which oil pastel is layered. This is the first of 3 pieces in the series, and this is the one that best embodies my goal of portraying a natural form that feels imposing and monumental in size. I strive to capture this feeling in most of my current abstract art, and it started with this piece from 2019, painted in response to seeing what remains of the towering cathedral dome of one of the missions that I had visited. This is San Juan Capistrano. With the edges of the form surpassing the canvas, I sought to make the audience feel small and kind of overwhelmed, capturing the feeling that came over me when I had first seen it in person. fascination with the unique landforms and cloudscapes of the Southwest became the ideal subject matter for exploring this approach. I started to document these shapes and translate them into straightforward, more abstracted forms. On the left here is a photo that I took in southern Utah, and alongside it are my sketches trying to simplify that shape. So to talk a little bit about my influences, this is Ken Price's art. Ken Price's art was a driving factor in the formation of the world that my art kind of exists in, especially his volcanic series. They're really devoid of life, and they feel like they present a sort of Haitian earth, either before or after plants and animals exist. It's a world of calm where existence is erased, something that I've found a bit of comfort in and seek to recreate in my own work. This is from Michael Heiser's series called Actual Size. It also impacted my work. This exhibition I had seen in LACMA. It displayed photographs of these boulders printed to their real size so that one could experience the feeling of being beside them. Ironically, I really didn't care for this show, but the composition and the placement of the photos really helped refine my own compositions towards the same subject matter. This is Wayne Tebon's art. It holds the most influential, probably the most recent impact in my work. He's known for his paintings of desserts and pies and lollipops, but only in this last year or two had I seen paintings of the mountains of California that he had painted. I felt a kinship with his compositions, and now I seek to bring more prismatic color and rich texture to my own pieces to define forms more efficiently. These next two pieces are examples of how I applied what I learned and what I find interest in to my work. This is another one in that series with Great Cloud. It's more of that like pre or post-life world and the imposing subject matter that's tightly framed. This one is specific to the experience of driving through Arches National Park at night. It was completely dark and we can really only see what was revealed to us by the headlights of cars behind us. So it was really an interesting experience. And this is what I consider to be my most successful synthesis of my influences and thoughts on portraying these landforms. I believe that this one came from a study of the beginning of an arch formation in Capitol Reef. It's kind of isolated from the remainder of the mountain it was being chiseled out of. It feels most exemplary of where my work has been headed recently, leaning into textures and bold shapes. This is where you can basically find me on Twitter and on Instagram. This is also my email address. I have a very unique name and I'm very easy to find. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pavonis. Thank you so much for your work. Okay, so we will go the next.
All right. Can everybody hear me? Am I good? Are we good? Okay. I am fully caffeinated and ready to start. All right. So my name is Jack Lehtinen. Hello. I'm in my last semester as a first-year drawing and painting student here. As a bit of background on myself, the mustache in that picture is not real. That is painted. But I started school back in 2018 as back at UW La Crosse in the health sciences. I switched my major probably like 12 different times from like, I think I was biology and then chemistry, radiology, back to biology. Like it was a mess. I don't know what I was doing. I was a communications major for like a week. But then back in 2020, I transferred to UWM as a kinesiology major, wanting to do physical therapy. And then I minored in art and I had no idea what I was doing. And then I got a job at a physical therapy clinic, realized that that was not for me. And then completely 180 and switched completely to drawing and painting. And here I am. And now we're here. So you can go to the next slide. All right. So this is the one of the pieces that was in the Juried show. It's titled "I've Got No Strings." This was incredibly tedious to work on, but the final product, I love how it turned out. This was for my Drawing 2 class, and it was a non-objective project. So as a first year student, I'm still trying to work out like where my artistic style is really progressing. This piece in particular, I think, is a good example of just like, I guess, more technical skills. I really like how it turned out, but it's not really the routes that I want to go down for the majority of my future work. I think my style shows itself in other pieces that I have in this presentation. And I myself, I'm still trying to work out like what that really all means. So if I'm like stumbling over my words, it's because I'm still trying to figure stuff out here. So yeah, let me go to my next one. All right, so this one is actually, I love this one. This one's really fun. This was also for my Drawing 2 class, and it was this like self-portrait collage. And one of my inspirations for this piece was, some people might have no idea what, but there's like this one villain in like Spy Kids 1 or 2 that has these like heads grown out of, I see some people nodding, so they might know what I'm talking about. But I realized that I draw a lot of my inspiration for my work from like my childhood and what I enjoyed as a kid. I just like to create works that people find interesting to look at and maybe like somewhat humorous, comical. I love comedy. I work at a stand-up comedy club. I don't do stand-up comedy. That's terrifying. I just bust tables. I clean plates and dishes, but still in that environment, it is a big influence just on what I kind of want to do. So maybe add like humorous aspects or just like random weird type of work. And that's, I think, pretty evident in this one, where it's just kind of all over the place and almost alien, which I really enjoy. This one is, this one's really funny. It's kind of more, a little spookier than the art style that I kind of want to go for. But I created this in, I think it was around Halloween, which makes sense just for the giant spider legs bursting out of my head. But this is an example of, I guess, more of the style that I'd like to go down, because it's more like telling a story. It's like more, I guess, entertaining. It like, so trying to find the right words. It's not in itself funny, but it's just like so out there that I just find it really interesting to look at, and just like the contrast between the lights and the darks, I just really enjoy. And this was made in my 2D art class. If I already mentioned that, I don't know. Which is one of my favorite classes. It was really fun to do this project. But yeah. Hey, Gio's watching. Shout out Gio. Hello. Okay, this was also in Gio's class. And this one did make the Juried show. And this one I had a lot of fun making. It took a long time, but it was definitely worth it. I especially like the name, because giddiness can mean both like happiness and motion sick, and just like all the looping like nature of this piece just kind of gives you that feeling of almost like motion sickness. But this is another one where I drew like a lot of influence from my childhood, just because I always remember going to like the 4th of July festivals back in my hometown, and just like the state fair, just that joy of like getting to the top of the Ferris wheel or going on a roller coaster, or like getting a few balloons, and then just making it look like a ticket booth was kind of a last minute decision, but I'm really happy with the final product. And I think it's definitely more towards the type of art that I want to create in the future. All right. This one is a project from my 3D art class. And this one, definitely you can see the influence from my childhood, just because it's literally just filled with random toys that I found just lying around my house. I am probably a little bit of a hoarder. Just the fact that I have like a toy giraffe just laying in my room that I was able to use for this is kind of crazy, but I found a good use for it and it worked out really well. But I really like this piece. It's how I made it. Each angle you look at it, you're almost finding something new in there. Like from a different side, you'll see a whole new set of toys, or from a different angle, you might see like inside through it, which I just really enjoyed. And then the color too, it's just like bright yellow. It just makes me think of like high energy and just like childish energy, which I really enjoyed in this piece. Yeah, go to the next one. Okay, this is this is kind of like what I'm working on right now. And this is a logo design that I made for kind of like an art Instagram account that I'm going to be starting up soon. I just made this through Procreate and spent hours just like scrapping and reworking the design. But I really like how it turned out because I think it encapsulates like the kind of childish influences that I want to put towards my work. Just in the fact that like the main the main figure of this logo is a toy Jack, which makes sense because my name is Jack. And the primary colors I use are like the simplest, most basic colors. It's like the first you learn as a kid. And it's kind of cool, like the yellow loops form like the S in studio. So it's like Studio Jack. I think it's really cool. I'm really happy with how this turned out. And I think it's a good, almost like symbol that'll kind of represent my work going forward. So yeah, I look forward to getting that page set up in the future. And I'm sure in the next few weeks, if you just on Instagram, just look up my name, it should come up. Or if you want to follow my main account, it's just my name. And then once I get it worked out, it'll link to it. So you'll be able to find all the work I'm doing. So yeah, that's it for me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Lichi. I have just begun my final year as a sculpture major. I kind of do a little bit of everything. That was my main goal in college, to be as well-rounded of an artist as I could. So a lot of what you will see in here is categorized by what medium is used.
All right, like reset itself.
Sorry, I got something. So I labeled a jack of all trades as a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. A lot of people always just say the beginning of that quote and never finish it. So that's something that I really strive for in my own work. And then my art account is linked at the bottom also. We can go to the next one. So in the following slide, I'll list all the processes that I have used within my time in college. It's a little bit big of a list, but you can go ahead and go to the next one. So I do a lot of metalwork. I think mostly everybody who knows me within the Peck School of the Arts knows that I usually do metalworking stuff. So I'm pretty proficient in my welding, and I just recently started doing blacksmithing, which was a lot of fun. And I've done a lot of casting. Casting is the piece that I currently have in the art show. I do lots of woodworks, and I originally started out as an artist with photography and ceramics. I was incredibly fortunate to go to a wonderful high school that did not cut any corners with their art program and the quality of teachers that they had. So I kind of got a little bit lucky of going into college, starting out really strong with all the skills and experiences I had already gained from my high school experience. But I originally had entered college as a psychology major with an art minor and came to UWM my second year and kind of switched that around. If you want to go ahead to the next slide. So the first kind of thing I started doing when I got to UWM was Mary kind of taught me a lot about mold making and kind of working with silicone and plaster and all of those different processes. I became a little bit obsessed after this with like baby doll heads and kind of disfiguring like old toys, you know, that are always supposed to be pristine and perfect and are looked at as this very nice kind of perfect picture of a childhood or a perfect picture of like a feminine toy and stuff like that. And I wanted to give it a spin off. So if you switch to the next slides, that will be the first one that I did. So this is right when COVID hit. I had originally done my molds for the baby head and for the baby feet. I think the lady at Goodwill thought I was a little crazy for buying like 12 baby dolls at once, and she was a little bit concerned because they all looked really scary. But it ended up turning into something that really pushed me as an artist to start kind of questioning what it was that I wanted to represent or kind of talk about. And a lot of my art kind of has to do with a little bit of that underlying psychology. If you go to the next one. This was one that I had made for fun during COVID. I called it the quarantine killer just because I had all of these extra like arts and crafts tools laying around, and I had always really loved the vibrancy of crayons. And I wanted to push my boundary of what I could do with mold making and how I could kind of adjust the thinking of, okay, well, now I'm not in a facility with millions of dollars worth of equipment to use. What can I still do at home to be successful, to not really put a damper on this kind of momentum that I had going as an artist? You can go ahead to the next slide. So currently, this is my in progress work. One of the two that I'm working on this semester. I obviously ripped apart all of these baby dolls. And in the sculpture lab, the wax that we use for metal casting, we kind of call it the like forbidden chocolate. So all of my friends in that class were kind of joking around, asking me if these were like chocolate baby dolls or what I had in mind doing that like with them. Did I want to do like a food base or anything like that? So these are going to be metal along the lines of the skull that I had done, and I'm going to construct a wooden bassinet with a metal baby mobile of baby parts going around it. So it's kind of like this weird circle going on, a baby mobile made out of baby doll parts that were once a baby's toy. So that's something I'm really excited about doing. I don't know if anybody has any experience with mold making or metal casting, but it is a painfully long, tedious process. So it's a little bit daunting to do again after having spent 9 months on the skull, but I think with the skills I've learned there, it should go a little bit easier. But that's one of the two things I'm working on currently. You can go ahead to the next slide. A lot of what I have done in the past is ceramics. So I've done wheel throwing, hand building, pinch pots, coil pots, you name it, I've done it. And I find that that is usually what sells best to people. So that's something I try to kind of keep up with. I like getting my hands dirty, and in ceramics, you can absolutely for sure do that. Go ahead to the next slide. So this is what I like to call my gnome home. This was one of the things I had done my freshman year of college. It was supposed to be a birdhouse, and my nieces have kind of taken it over into this cute little fairy garden. This was one of those slab constructed things that really had me outside of my own comfort zone. I particularly like doing more dark and twisty things that kind of go along the lines with like abnormal psychology and internal feelings that a lot of people really struggle to get outward. So this was one of my happier pieces that I felt as though was really successful, and was really proud of the process that from start to finish, I was accurately successful in what I wanted to achieve. We can go to the next one. This is something that I completed last semester. It was body of roughly 30 pieces. I had never fired anything in the Kenilworth studio before or at UWM in general, so I wasn't a big fan of the way these glazes turned out. I am very OCD about the way that I like my ceramic pieces to look. But what this really taught me was that, you know, sometimes you might not love what you made, but other people love it, and it's exactly what they want and what they want to see. So just kind of a node to sometimes you might not love what you make, but other people do, and it'll sell, kind of fact of the matter. But I definitely pushed myself to make like a larger body of work. So it came out to like 30 or so pieces of pottery that I pretty much sold majority of them, which was really exciting. But that was last semester. So if you want to go ahead and keep going. So wood is the next kind of material that I have really been striving to become proficient in. I've done a couple different things in the past, just kind of testing the waters with wood. It's not a very forgiving material like metal is. So to me, that was kind of a scary endeavor. You know, if you carve out something or if it chips away, there's not much that you can do to fix it. You kind of have to roll with the dice. If you want to go ahead to the next one. This is my life-size hand that I had carved post-COVID, and it was definitely a lot of work, but taught me a lot of the skills on how to use those tools, the angle grinders, die grinders, table saw, you know, jigsaw, all of those things. And that had me really paying attention to the human body and trying to get work to move a little bit better and to stay a little bit more fluid with not keeping everything so like stagnant and just cut and dry. Thank you, Zinta, if you want to keep going to the next slide. This is what I'm currently working on now. I am in Glenn Williams' class, and if you guys haven't had him before and you still have time in school, I highly recommend taking a class with him. He is the best professor I've had, completely supportive. And I was gonna do a series of just 4 of these heads in variation, but we had our critique yesterday and he said, no, I want 7. So 7 it is. I was actually able to finish these in under 12 hours each, not including like glue up time, but they are going to be a series of apparently now 7 heads on a piece of driftwood that will have like a flattened bottom, and they'll each have like rebar in the back of their head. So kind of doing like this heads on stake kind of thing. But the main goal was to really depict different emotions and exaggerate them to an extent of just them being very cut and dry. Like you can tell exactly what kind of emotion they're depicting, but some look more realistic and some look a little bit more cartoonized. So you kind of get a variation of both. So they are pine, cut up, chiseled, all that stuff. The one with the stringy mouth, he has a linseed oil cover to him. The other one doesn't, but they're both brushed with a wire brush after being blow torched. You can go ahead to the next slide. So my metalwork, you can keep going. Yeah, so this is the chair that I did from scratch. It was a pain in the butt. It was a lot of work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. I don't know if anybody's ever angle grinded stuff before, but it is very overwhelming physically, very taxing, but it is a fully functional chair. You can sit on it, use it, toss it around, it's fine. And I kind of wanted to go with something that had a little bit more motion to it, so you can kind of bounce in the chair nicely. I did stay within the parameters of 30 inches, so it's a little bit of a tight squeeze, but as of right now, I really love the metal, sanded metal finish, and it's up for discussion if I should or should not powder coat it, but you can keep going.
Victoria, you have like a minute left, just so you know.
Yep, you can keep going.
Sorry, my
This is
computer's kind of
just,
slow.
that's okay, it happens. This is just a couple of different pieces that I did with blacksmithing. So this is a family tree. You can go to the next one. Some bottle openers that I did that were a lot of fun. And This is a carving fork that I did for my dad for Christmas for the next, holidays and stuff. He's really big on grilling, so it was something that I wanted to try. It has a brass brush finish to it, but is just mild steel. And going. This is the skull that is in the show that was done with the metal casting. Was a long process, but it really depicts on the kind of theme and process that I like doing in my work. So that's kind of what I'm going to be continuing on in the next couple of years with the skulls and stuff. And I think that's the last slide. Yep. So thank you all very much. I appreciate your time, and I hope that if you're ever in the sculpture lab, you'd feel comfortable popping by. I'm almost there every day, all day. So feel free to come watch us do a metal pour sometime if you ever wanted to.
Thank you, Victoria. And Beth?
All right. So I'm going to go a little bit out of order. I'm Beth Lemerand. I'm a sophomore at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. But before I talk about myself, I'd like to show the pieces in the show. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So this is a self-portrait that I did in my Drawing 2 class. In terms of process, it was a bunch of photos of me at different angles that I chopped up and collaged on a small scale. And then using a grid system, I redrew it on a massive piece of paper. And this is the biggest drawing that I had ever done up until this point. And I'm super proud of it. And I'm really grateful to have it in the show. If you could go to the next one. This is a print that I did also last semester. This is done with a process called Intaglio Printing, which is printing with a copper plate. And it's what a lot of the old masters used to do. This is, funnily enough, also the biggest print that I've ever done, like etching. She's 9 inches by 12 inches, which was really daunting when I started working on it. And I'll talk a little bit more about the process as we go. Yes, and I am an old master, actually, if you want to go to the next one. So a little bit about me. I'm studying to get a BFA in art and design with a concentration in print and narrative forms. So what does that mean? I'm a printmaker by nature. So essentially I will spend a lot of time to process an image that I can have multiple originals of that image. So up at the top there, that's me with my print. And at the bottom, there's a picture of me and my dad in a t-shirt that I actually printed for him. So that's done with a process called silkscreen printing, which is essentially like you make a stencil on a stretched frame and you kind of push ink through it. And that's how a lot of t-shirt and apparel is printed. Something I think important, oh, could you actually go back? Sorry. Something I think that's important to note is that I graduated high school in the spring of 2020. So a lot of the work that I've done before this year was completely from home. And it made me really realize that the thing that I wanted to do most was printmaking and having access to a studio, which I had not had before college. And it also made me realize that the thing that I wanted to depict the most was portraiture. So all of the work I'll be showing you guys is portraiture. And I don't have any work from pre-COVID in this because I'm really excited about all the printmaking I get to do. So that's what I'll be talking about. You can flip to the next one. All right, this is another intaglio print. This is a depiction of my mom and I. So essentially I drew out the image, I put it on the plate, and I animated it. So if you want to flip to the next one, I have the animation. Hopefully it'll play. Fingers crossed. So this is essentially us just rolling our eyes at each other. I feel like most of the conversations I have with my mom, we end up rolling our eyes at each other and we look super similar. So I thought that that'd be a fun way to sort of depict it. So in terms of process, if you want to move to the next one. So here are my reference pictures, my beautiful mom and the picture that I took trying to like mimic her. Beneath it are some sketches. I had tons more sketches, especially of her, because I really struggled drawing her. But once I had those sketches, I transferred it onto my copper plate. So this picture on the right here is my plate. Before you're able to scratch your image in, you cover it with sort of like a waxy coating, and you can scratch it out kind of like those scratch boards that you do when you're a kid. So everywhere that you scratch is where the acid will touch the plate and like make an impression, and that's what catches the ink and lets you print it. If you want to go to the next one. These are some proofs. So essentially what that means is like sketches, but these have been run through the press. So up at the top there, that's my copper plate. Once that coating has been removed and there's been some tinting applied, and tinting it, you're really just putting like a tooth in the plate so it also holds ink. The print on the bottom left, I believe, was one of my first proofs after I had tinted it. And on the other side is what they started to look like when I was getting ready to animate. So you'll notice one on the bottom right has no irises. I actually wiped out the eyes so that I could hand draw the little irises in so I could make them move, because that was a lot easier than trying to like burnish out that detail for every print, which is possible, but it just, with the time frame, it didn't make sense for me to do that. So if you want to go to the next one. And here we just have the same print as before. This one, the eyes are actually printed on. All of the rest of them, they are not, they're drawn in. But I'm super proud of this one. And it was a lot of work, especially having to do so many of them so I could animate them and have them, well, their eyes. You want to go to the next one? So bringing it back to the piece that I have in the show, this is done with the same process. But you'll notice that the undergarments that this lady is wearing are a different color. This is done by a process called shinkolei. So essentially I took another type of paper and I cut out the shape that I wanted, and I adhered them to the paper and put them through the press. You like lay the paper down on your plate and you roll it through the press, and it sticks down and it catches the ink the same way that it would before. This print is super heavily inspired by a lot of Mary Cassatt's prints, which are done with a different process. I believe most of hers are woodcut carvings, but she has this beautiful, delicate like line work and like super flat, bold shapes, and that's really what I wanted to emulate, despite it being a completely different medium. So in the next slide, I believe I have another proof. So that's this digital sketch. Here's a process video. It's a TikTok that I made outlining the process. It doesn't need the sound. I don't know if it'll play with it or not, but I can sort of walk through it. Here's my plate, just in the processing stage. The acid bath that we put the plates in to edge it. My plate before it was put through the press. Soaking paper to print. Inking it up and running it through the press. So the main image, the proof there, is just the line work. So that was before I added any tinting or did the coloring and picked out the ink color and stuff, but I'm obsessed with the line work. I almost like the line work more than the actual print. Yeah. And then this is another print. This is done through a process called lithography. So it's printing with a piece of limestone. I think it's limestone, but you're printing on a rock essentially. So this looks like a charcoal drawing because I drew on a stone with something called a lithocrayon, which I think I have a picture of in the next slide. So you take these little crayons, they're kind of like a grease pencil, and you draw out what you want on the exposed stone. Here we have a process picture and a close-up of the little coffee pot. This image is supposed to be like me looking into my window, like I'm looking at my desk. So it's kind of like an Alice in Wonderland, like warped perspective, like almost like you're looking into a dollhouse. On the next slide, we have pictures of me processing the stone, getting ready to print. So that's my finished drawing. You'll notice it's almost identical to the actual prints that I pulled. And next to it is a picture of my professor generously putting etch on. So you put the etch onto the stone and it makes it receptive to hold the ink. So everywhere that was greasy, drawn on with a greasy pencil, holds the ink, which is how you can get the image to look just like a drawing. And then it gets run through the press. Here's a video of me actually printing it. Printing lithography is a super involved process, which I found out sort of the hard way. But you have to constantly be keeping your stone wet, because the reason it works is that water and like grease and oil don't mix. So you'll see me like sponging my stone and then rolling out ink on a piece of glass and then sponging it again and putting the ink on the stone and running it through the press. And it was so fun though. I love doing it. And that's all. I do have pictures of a work in progress that I'm working on. This is another screen print. So just like how I printed on that t-shirt for my dad, but these are printed on paper. It's for a book that I'm making. More portraiture, but these are photo-based images. And if you want to see more of the work I'm doing, I have my Instagram and my Etsy links. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth. Oh, welcome.
Hi, I'm Haneul Seo, a graphic design student, DDC major student at UWM. Also, I'm an international student from South Korea. I was majoring history in Korea before, and the one project I made when I was exchange student at Northern Michigan University changed my whole career. So next slide. So this is a visual artwork that I have ever made at the time in computer art class. So I wasn't quite interested in art, and especially like visual art. So yeah, especially like creating something by my hands, like drawing or things like that. However, I just realized that I actually didn't have to be good at drawing to create visual art. Like if I use computer or digital fabrication. So it was very helpful for me to explore my idea when I use the digital and computer art, especially Photoshop or CAD, such as Cinema 4D or Blender. So this is the following art that I made with all of sources that I took a photo and get the texture by myself. So if you go back to, yeah, so using the source, I made it like this. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, this is all of my hands and then leaves that I got from the nature and texture even. So yeah, next slide. Yeah, next slide. Then I felt that I would spend 1,000 hours for creating this digital artwork, which I never felt when majoring history. So I decided to change my major and officially started studying art and design at UWM. But I had no experience ever at drawing or kind of handling the tools for visual art. So some people, when I just transfer to design, used to say that you might have been better to stay in history, or the design was just fun for you, but not as your career. So I wanted to prove myself that I'm deserved to follow this career path. So practice and practice again. So this is what I got at the time. Eventually, yeah, if you go to the next slide, eventually I proved myself as a like first year student outstanding. Also, I got the semi-finalist award at the Global Adobe Design Achievements with this computer art. So next slide. So going back and forth between Korea and America as an international students, people started to ask me what the US, like United States, looks like in Korea and what Korea looks like in United States. So for people in Korea, I was Korean who was not used to be anymore. In America, I was just Korean. So I was kind of foreigner in both countries. So I got confused about myself, like such as who am I and where I'm belonging to. So that's what I was inspired and made this series, Who Am I? Then I decided, let the people not define me, building me by myself. That's what I wanted to say by the photo at the right side. So next slide. So once I accepted myself as who I am, then I could see people as who they are as a result. So looking at the community and what they are struggling in these days with and what is the problem in this society, I got into all of the events happened in this world and started to make poster for introducing the social issues and what they are struggling with. Thinking of who are we supposed to be, I especially look close to the human rights issues. This is what I made for broken democracy in Myanmar. People, in a specific way, people voted to elect their presidents, and the person who the military leader didn't support became the president. And the military leader made a coup d'etat and killed people who didn't agree with him. So I made it like the broken democracy. So next slide. So this is a poster to speak about Stop Asian Hate. So basically, 6 Asian American people were killed in Atlanta in 2021. And the killer mentioned about the racism. So I wanted to let people aware of how Asian American people are also marginalized in this society. So next slide. And this work I made for highlighting people who speak their opinion without any responsibility in online, especially. So I wanted to say that we are about to be careful when we are especially when we talk in person, we are very careful to speak out even on one word, because the word represents ourselves and our personality or our characteristic. But people in online are not serious about it, so they kind of don't have any responsibility for their opinion in online. So I wanted to highlight it. And yeah, and next slide. So I'm interested in UI UX design now as a graphic designer. It's like interacting with people in app or web through the interface design. It was my pleasure giving people the comfort or when they use the screen product that I made. Especially in this semester, I'm taking universal design, and I just noticed that how the many interface design in this world doesn't care of the disabled people. So I set my career to make interface design for the disabled people especially. So furthermore, I thought that it doesn't have to be stuck in screen design, but also the non-screen interface, such as machine interaction or interface or user-friendly design between computer device and human being. So this is a future goal, and that's what I'm working through now. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Haneul. All right. What next up is Joe.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. My name is Joe Willis. I'm a junior in the new studio practice fine arts major at NIAD. And I'm a multidisciplinary artist with a focus in sculpture. My studio practice revolves around filtering, selecting, and assembling objects that I find important. Process is also really integral to my work. I'm invested in listening to and learning from the material I'm working with, as well as the conceptual weight that a material can hold. I'm interested in a metaphorical, emotional, or physical alchemy. My practice searches for a poetic transformation of the ordinary. And you can go to the next slide. This is one of the pieces that's in the Juried show, and the title is King Victim, the Lionheart. It's a trophy of cast aluminum, and I started with the idea that I wanted to make a vessel that could hold water and be passed between myself, my mother, my grandmother. I wanted a kind of physical repository for emotional transmission and grief kind of trickling down through generations. However, during the casting process, the mold got shifted and it was cast with two holes, one kind of in the middle where this design of a person is and one that's larger and towards the bottom. And so it became this thing that couldn't do what I was asking it to do, a vessel that couldn't hold water. And I was really interested in that, and my concept behind the piece began to shift. It became more about how we ask people, artwork, and idols to be what they can't. And my current body of work kind of seeks to answer these kind of questions and seeks empathy in failure. This is the other piece that I have in the Juried show, and this is titled Fair Maiden. And so what I did for this piece is I found this website where museums had been 3D scanning and uploading like models of artifacts. And so I went into Blender and I kind of collaged two different artifacts together. One that was just like a classical Greek trophy and one that is a sculpture of like the Pegasus birth myth. And I printed them in a ceramic resin. And so in these images, the object is unfired, but it could be fired to be like porcelain. But I think the fact that it is unfired is important to me and important to the concept of this piece, because it's not in its finished form. It's kind of imperfect. The print itself is kind of like slumped over to one side, and there's a hole in the bottom of this one too. And so it's another vase or vessel that can't hold water. And then this is an installation of this piece. I have an animation of the model kind of like rotating in space, and then I have the actual object itself set up on these hard drives and on this pedestal, on this foam. I was thinking a lot about like digital artifact and the distance between the real thing, like the actual artifacts that are somewhere in a museum in like London, and the distance between that and the print that I've made. I think that's really, really interesting. I also wanted to say just like one last thing about the last piece. The title Fair Maiden kind of references like both Medusa and like Maiden as slang for a racehorse that's never won. This piece is titled
Joe, I think you froze.
I think I left for a second.
Yeah, I think you froze, and then I think yeah. But proceed.
I was just kicked. But yeah, so I had gone home for the weekend and I found this bird's nest in a shoebox, and it was something that my brother had found, and it was like as old as I was. And I took it back with me to Milwaukee and into my apartment, and almost immediately I like tripped and dropped it and broke it. And I kind of built this structure around it like an apology. I chose the title Ma because a bird's nest feels like a symbol for home and for my mother, but also because the nest feels like an open or like hungry mouth. This is kind of the piece that started my practice down the path that it's currently on. It's titled The Comet. I had this idea to ask something delicate to hold something heavy, and so I made this beeswax cast of a bracelet my mom had given me, and I made this like faux rock structure using printed images of graphite and of plaster. And I wanted to hang this from the ceiling and have it be this kind of comet. Comet as like a symbol for change or destruction, or something that's like far away from its home. And so I tried to pick it up and hang it, but the beeswax snapped. And so I kind of mended it with plaster, and the act of mending became really important to me. And just thinking about this object as like a stand-in for someone who is taking on more than they can, or who can't perform in the way that someone else needs them to. This piece is titled A Bit Too Much and Not Nearly Enough, and this is a still from a video of the installation. There's this kind of like object made of modeling clay, and then it's sitting on this like metallic, this heavy metal base, and has tubing wrapped around it, and then there's a water pump that's pumping this kind of pink like vomit fluid through it. And I got really interested in like abstract art last semester, and I wanted to make a work within that kind of visual language. I was thinking of the body inside out, the body casting off or expelling, and I wanted to investigate questions of how the body holds memory, how certain memories loop and recycle through the body, and how grief manifests. And so I had this water pump, and the fluid was moving and kind of trickling, and I had the sound of like a stomach digesting that was playing off of like a cassette player, and I kind of wanted it to be really like focused on the inside of a body and the kind of disgust that comes with that. And it, the fluid too was made from like old soup. It smelled really terrible. It was in like a really small space. But yeah, just trying to invoke disgust. This piece is titled Return to Lake Michigan. And so I made this cast of kind of like the top part of my head, and I cast it in ice, and it was bathwater and a prick of my blood. I was thinking a lot about Janine Antony's Lick and Lather pieces, and thinking about kind of like one individual experience releasing into something larger. This is a piece that material was really important to me. I wanted to have a really strong connection to myself. And so I had this like bathwater and blood, and took it to the lake and washed the face until it eventually was just a piece of ice, and I let it float out into the water. Yeah, thank you all for listening. This is my email and my Instagram. I'm pretty active on Instagram if you guys are interested in seeing process or other work.
All right, thank you so much, Joe. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so last call for Jimmy Cobb. Are you here now? I don't see your name, but if you are here, you can just say in the chat or unmute, and we can go back. No, I don't think Jimmy's here. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop the share though. And can everybody unmute themselves, or do I have to unmute you? Sorry.
I think we can still unmute ourselves.
Okay. Even those who are not co-hosts. Maybe not. Okay, I'm gonna allow, and now I think everyone should be able to. But yeah, I just wanted to unmute to give a round of clapping for everybody. Congratulations. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your art with us. It's always such a joy to get to hear a little behind the scenes of some of the art in the show. So yeah. All right, so I don't think I saw any specific questions in the chat, but if you had a specific question, please feel free to unmute and ask. If you're asking one of the artists or the whole panel, either is fine. Let's see. No, I don't think there is any. Any questions from anyone?
I can ask a question.
Yeah,
if that's
I have
okay.
some too. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I know that someone referenced, it might have been Beth, kind of the experience of making and being an artist during COVID. And I'm just curious to see how you all feel about kind of what these last couple of years have been, and how they're informing the work that you're making. I know that's a big question, but some of you are at the beginning of your artistic journey and some of you are closer to the end of college. And I'm curious about that experience for you.
I can say that it was incredibly frustrating as a sculpture major who does everything hands-on. You know, I was gifted this opportunity with millions of dollars worth of equipment and never-ending access to it. And then all of a sudden having that taken away, like right before the welding, you know, process, which I was incredibly excited about, was really frustrating. So once COVID hit, that really put a pause on my like, well, what the heck do I do? Who am I as an artist? Because I don't enjoy drawing and I don't enjoy that kind of process because I think of everything in a three-dimensional sense. Like I look at everything in the round. So it made it really difficult. At least for me as an artist, to kind of just be like, okay, well, this is the reality of it. What can I do with my skills now to kind of keep going forward to still feel like I'm being productive and achieving something, you know, greater than just making projects out of sticks and rocks and spending all the money on equipment and tools and stuff.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. It was definitely really difficult to try to make sculpture at home, especially because I wanted to work with plaster a lot. And then I was trying to make plaster in my kitchen and it was just really not a great experience. So yeah, I'm glad to be able to be back and have lab access now. But it was definitely a frustrating experience at first.
Something for me, I actually decided that I wanted to do art during the pandemic. So it really just gave me a chance to, since we were all not doing anything, just locked inside, it gave me a chance to really just think about like what I was doing with my life and like who, like I feel like I learned a lot about myself through just like being forced to just like think about like nothing and just like figure out like what makes me happy, where do I want to go in life, and that kind of steered me towards art. So for me it was somewhat of a positive, but I can understand everybody that like didn't have the materials and didn't have access to stuff. That must have been a real pain in the butt, but yeah.
I know that like I talked a little bit about it in my talk, but I think the biggest thing that I learned how to do was like problem solve and work from home. I did a lot of like screen printing and like lino cuts, which is like carving stamps, just out of necessity because there wasn't really anything else I could do. I didn't have access to like a studio, obviously, which I think has definitely in some ways helped because now I feel more resourceful and I feel more like better equipped to solve my own problems because I spent so much time doing it from home.
I feel like for me, it was a great time for me to focus my ideas because this was prior to when I was going to school, and it was kind of like the start of me realizing that I wanted to go back to school. So it was really nice to be able to have a moment in time, you know, if you were able to block out everything else that was happening, have a moment in time in which I felt like I could really focus my thoughts and kind of create a synthesis with what I was going for, and kind of come to the realization that I wanted to do something that was more pushing myself a little bit further than just 2D, because the work that was in the show was something that is in 2D prior to me becoming a sculpture major. So it was a nice moment of clarity.
Welcome to the dungeon, by the way.
I have really enjoyed it there.
For me, actually, COVID-19 doesn't hit me because I was back in Korea to finish my military service, which is mandatory for every guys. So right when I entered the military, COVID-19 started, which is 2020 March. So I didn't even realize it was COVID-19 because outside people are not allowed to come in the military base. So I couldn't meet any people outside of military. So yeah, I didn't feel about like COVID-19, but yeah, because in military service during the time, I was not allowed to use any higher quality of software such as Photoshop or Illustrator. So what I have practiced was kind of coding and making some website by using some coding skill, which is not required to use some Photoshop or Illustrator. So at the time, I found my career dream as like UI UX designer. So yeah, it was I believe that it was pretty special time for me to find my future career. And I'm glad that when I came back this semester to America, everything has been normal. So yeah.
Thanks everyone for sharing.
Anybody else have any questions come up now? I had a question for Pavonis. Is that how you say it? Pavonis? Okay. So within your work, I feel like of the ones I've seen, obviously I haven't seen all of your work, but the ones I've seen have this very specific texture that is mostly throughout the piece, but then there's also obviously some definition between the pieces. So is there a reason why, is it just like the medium, or is there a reason why you kind of have this kind of grainy texture? Is there anything to it in terms of the work itself?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I really like impasto style works, and I do find a lot of inspiration in them, but I primarily work for 2D art in acrylic, and that has the texture in a lot of those works has not necessarily come from acrylic building up in one sitting. Most of my canvases have been painted over about 3 times before I get to a point where I feel very satisfied with them. And it probably does have to do with like there being a really thick layer of, actually multiple thick layers of paint that are underneath the finished painting. And I do paint in a very more like, I guess, sculptural way. So there's a lot of paint that's on the canvas, and I use a lot of just like some crusty brushes that apply really thick on the canvas. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you for answering it. Yeah, I'm always interested in the techniques for the different textures that can happen, especially with maybe a texture that you're using a different material to achieve. And that's always kind of fascinating to me, of how different materials can look like other techniques. So yeah, cool. Okay, so Jack,
Yeah.
you said you're relatively new to kind of all of the different art style or art media that you're working with, right?
Yeah.
And you have, like in the show, you have the paper cut, and then but you also had a lot of drawings as well. So do you think you'll ever do more paper cutting or anything along those lines that isn't just like drawing or painting?
Yeah, I'm kind of open to everything right now, just because I don't really want to close myself off to really any mediums. The one thing I would like to do is just to utilize more color in my work. I feel like I just have the most practice in like charcoals and like drawing and stuff. But I'm trying to just like get better at using paints and colors, and maybe I can try to work in some like colored charcoals or chalks into some of my works. So yeah.
Yeah, it sounded like you're interested in trying it all and just seeing where you kind of land. And yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think a lot of you seem to dabble in a lot of different media, which is very interesting because you know, each type of medium does different things, or you can make it do different things that it doesn't normally do. And I think that's really, really cool to see all the different, you know, it's all of your work, but in the different medium, how it sort of changes. Yeah, great, cool. Well, keep up, you know, experimenting and all that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Victoria, hi.
Hi.
You had a very comprehensive presentation and a lot of, yeah, you dabble in a lot of things. So
I do a lot.
yeah, I really I found the masks or the kind of faces very fascinating. Was there, I know you talked about like psychology and sort of the emotions of people and how you kind of want to express that within these physical forms. With those faces, was there any other inspirations, visual inspirations that brought you to those faces? Like the one had the strings in the mouth, was there like a specific cue for that? Or were you just kind of considering what mouths do and like what they might look like in different scenarios?
Really, like it was just one of those rare times where I just had like the epiphany. Like I sat and like in this well of I don't know what the heck to do, and my schooling is coming to an end and I want to do all these things, but I don't have enough time. And you know, I was so upset with COVID and like kind of just sitting in that, like, this is stupid, I hate all of this, like I don't want to sit here and do nothing, but I don't know what I want to do, but I want to be proud of what I'm doing. And my mom had brought up at one point in time asking like if I had still had the paintings that I did when I was young. And I was like, no, I think I left them somewhere. I don't know where they were. And that recircled into this specific project. In that point of my life, I was really struggling with everything that was going on inside. And there are two kind of types of people in my family, those who brush everything under the rug and, you know, just kind of keep on going and pretending everything's fine until they trip over the mountain and then it explodes. And the other type where we sit down, we argue, you know, we scream, we yell, we cry, and everything's just done. Like once it's done, it's done. And that's how I prefer to do things. But I realized at that point in my life, I was just really bottling up those like intense emotions, like intense stress and intense anger and anxiety and all of these things. And it really got to me in like a physical way, like it made me physically sick. So when I started thinking back about, okay, like what do I want to do? And I kind of decided that I wanted to full circle and do those faces almost exactly the way I had done all those paintings when I was like 8, 10, 11. And all those paintings have the screaming face, you know, this like void of, you know, being able to say something, but you can clearly so tell on these faces that they want to get something out, but something's restricting them to. And like this tension that you feel in between them, like they kind of look like a somebody, but they also look like a nobody. And we all kind of know how it feels to have like this screaming bubble inside of you, you know, that you can't get out. So the second one that had just like the O mouth is going to have like drilled holes into the side of the mouth. And like, I'm going to weave twine through it. So it kind of has this like crisscrossy pattern. The other one's going to be like a frowning face. And then apparently I have to do 7 now. So I have to decide on those emotions, but it was really just a full circle into how and where I started and like really why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's really to just advocate for those who struggle to find words for what they're looking for to say and what they're going through. So that was really like my main goal for that, was to kind of full circle everything about who I was as an artist and where I started.
Cool. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, the severe emotions that come up from very severe circumstances that, again, yeah, they're hard to exactly put a name to. So it makes sense to put the visual to them. So yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I think Beth is next. So hello, I was listening to you talk. I could kind of visualize the process because I'm not an artist necessarily, but I try to dabble in things. So I took an Intaglio class like the past couple of weeks at the craft center. And so I did some chinkole and these sorts of techniques. So it was kind of fun to know a little bit more about like what you're doing in the process and everything, and kind of understand how intensive that process is, just like down to the inking and all of the very particular things. So very cool to get to see that. So I just wanted to ask maybe just a simple question, but you had a lot of Intaglio work. So is there something specific about Intaglio that you really like or gravitate towards? Is it something you've just used the most? Kind of what's your relationship with it?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I went to a massive high school and we had a really well-funded art program. So we used to do something called dry point etching, which is very similar to Intaglio, but instead of dipping it in acid, you just like scratch into a piece of plastic. And I did a lot of those in high school, maybe not a lot of great ones, but I definitely had a lot of experience with the tools and the process of printing, especially. And it just so happens that my Intaglio class was my first actual in-person art class at UWM. So I think I just really dove in, and I had been so desperate for like this need for an in-person class and actually getting to be in the print shop. I was so excited that I just like gave it my all.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and then you said too that you made the screen printed shirts, and was that like a not a self-portrait, but was that a portrait of your dad and him wearing his own portrait, or no?
No, he does actually have a t-shirt with his own face on it.
Okay.
But no, that was a really close family friend of ours that I did a portrait of.
Very cool. Yeah. Do you think you'll do more t-shirts in the future, or?
Oh yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I love screen printing. It's so fun, and there's something so satisfying about it. And it's one of the things that I didn't teach myself entirely, but I really learned how to do it from home. So it's something that I want to keep doing and do better.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, Haneul. Hello.
Yeah.
So you told us about a lot of different art medium that you've worked within. You know, it looked like photography and drawing, and also the digital design work as well that you do, and with those really awesome posters and graphics that kind of talk about very topical things and try to give an image to it. And so those are really cool to see, because the piece that's in the show of yours, right, is an animation. And so could you possibly talk a little bit about how you came to make this animation, and yeah, where that fit into, because you kind of had like 2017, 2018 to now. So where did that sort of fit in?
So basically the animation was about like who am I, and then who am I, and I'm who I am, and things like that. It was like kind of consistence of that the theme and topic, because when I came to America, I was like confusing about who am I, as I said about before. So I was like, whenever I came to America, like people, oh, you're Korean, and then when I go back to Korea, and then people say, oh, you're not who you used to be now because you are Americanized, or things like so. Like, is it because I ate some American food, or is it I experienced like American culture or things like that? So that's why I wanted to speak in the animation, because I've actually the first time that when I came to America, it was kind of I think it was a kind of accident to things like that, because my friend recommended me to apply to exchange program. That's why I applied it, even though I couldn't speak any English. But yeah, for some reason I got accepted. So that's why I came to America, and it became a reason to stay in America to study design more. So yeah, if you saw the animation, the guy brought some egg so that to the fly. So that's my kind of my friend that brought me to America. And when it dropped, it breaks, and then when a baby came out. So it basically means that I had nothing when I came to America first time, and I becoming more experiencing both Korean and American culture and becoming I. So yeah, the original title was like Becoming I rather than Who Am I. So yeah. So eventually it breaks myself and making whole new difference aspect between Korean and American between. So yeah, that's what I wanted to tell, that nobody can define me, but I'm kind of building and making myself and giving a meaning into it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's very powerful, and the way the images sort of morph into each other and continue to kind of grow and change a little bit, I feel like totally speaks to that experience of figuring out yourself, where you fit in, where you don't fit in, all those ideas and that make you you. So yeah, cool. Thank you for sharing. Thanks. Okay, I know we're at 8:30, but I did want to ask Joe a question. So hi Joe. Okay, so I was struck by how so many of your artworks, you know, you're on this one path and you're like, it's gonna be this and that's what it's gonna be, and then the process itself actually tells you what it's going to be, or makes you rethink like the sort of maybe what would be seen as an accident or an issue is now kind of given a new life. And the piece is sort of I think you said something about expectations on things, and sort of the expectations of the art have a life of their own and they don't always work with what you thought it was going to be. And I found that really interesting, that out of these things that maybe someone would be like, oh, well, I'm going to make a new one, it's not good enough or something, that you kind of embraced and utilized for the meaning of the piece in general. So when those things happen, like the beeswax breaking, do you feel like you're, I don't know, you feel, I imagine you feel sort of like sad that it didn't work, but also kind of excited to see what it became. But like, what is your, what goes through your mind when those things happen, and how does it sort of affect your relationship to art in general?
That's a great question. I think a lot about like chance and intention. And I think when moments like the trophy being cast with a hole, or like the beeswax breaking, I get kind of like disappointed at first, but then I start thinking about like problem solving. I like what Beth said about the pandemic being like an exercise and learning how to problem solve. And I think that's kind of one of my favorite things about making art, is like either like making or like figuring out a problem and then working on fixing it or resolving it in some way. And so I think these moments when the art like does break or does fail in some way, it just feels like another like problem to solve. I was talking to somebody recently in critique, and they told me to like follow the logic of a piece. And I think that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. So it feels like following the logic, or like maybe each piece isn't like the answer to a question, but just like part of figuring out the answer.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. All right. It's 8:31. Last call for any other questions that anyone might have. You can also send them in the chat. Otherwise, if you want to, feel free to write in the chat or unmute and talk amongst yourselves. Like, we're in person, that's totally cool. I know it seems sort of like everyone's muted and only one person's talking, but I know that sometimes doesn't feel like it's a community, that we're all here together, but we are all here to hear each other and talk. So feel free to do that, or you can head out, that's fine too. I just want to reiterate, my name's Emily Hankins. I'm the curator and manager of the Union Art Gallery, and it's always such a pleasure to have the Juried show and see all this amazing work that you all have a hand in. And I'm gonna put the links again, just in case anybody else wanted them from the beginning. So that again has our website, Black Lives Matter resources, our Facebook, Instagram, and then our virtual exhibitions. Like I said, the Juried show is coming down tomorrow, but we will have a virtual version of it up on our website soon. So you can send friends and family there if they didn't end up getting to see the show. They'll be able to see it virtually. It's a scan of the whole gallery, so you can kind of walk through it, so to speak. And it's pretty cool. So yeah, and then first year experience is coming up. It opens April 14th. And that'll be our last show of the semester, and then the last show of our space as well. So we hope you'll join us for that. That would be great as well. And thank you for joining us for this programming. And thank you to all the artists. Your presentations were wonderful. Thank you.